Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Japanese on the home side, half Danish on the away side. And out of these two breweries, it is only the Danish one that's featured on the channel before, if memory serves me correctly. When it comes to the Japanese brewery though, this is one that I have been aware of for quite some time. They're quite interesting when it comes to the Japanese beer scene because they're one of the very few breweries that specialise in lager brewing, and they've got some really interesting quirky things about their brewery as well. So this is one that I really should have checked out a little bit earlier than I have. But when it comes to the Danish brewery, I've had many beers from them before. They're one of the founders of the Danish beer scene and the kind of gypsy brewing movement in Europe, I guess we could say. And they've always done really solid beers in many different styles actually. So if you haven't tried any of their beers, I highly recommend that you do. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I very much enjoy. It's not one that you come across all that often, generally speaking, but I've been quite lucky to try a few beers from this beer style's native area, I guess we could say. So yeah, to find a Japanese brewed example of this style is quite interesting, and it is a style that I know the away brewery can do quite well. So I'm curious to see what the Japanese brewery is going to contribute to this one. But all in all, I think it should make for a very interesting collaboration. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for the home side of things then, we are going to go to Morioka City in Iwate Prefecture in the Tohoku region in the northern part of Honshu here in Japan. And we're going to have a look at my first beer from Baeren Bier. So this particular beer is called Cool-Ship Viennal Lager. It comes in at 5% ABV, and I think you know what style this one is from the name. But you might also notice that the artwork is very familiar. This is of course a collaboration with Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery who have their roots in Copenhagen. So yeah, this is yet another beer that I picked up from liquor shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Imaichi here in Osaka. A lovely little beer shop run by Koji and his daughter Rika, based in Koji's grandfather's old soy sauce factory. They always have a really interesting selection of Japanese beers with many nice American, Canadian, Australian things, and a good number of the more old school European things, Belgians and Germans and so on. But as always, I'll put the link to their Facebook page in the video description below. I highly recommend you check them out if you find yourself here in Osaka, and you'll find some very interesting things like this. But yes, the Cool-Ship Viennal Lager, 5% ABV from Baeren Bier in Iwate Prefecture here in Japan in collaboration with Mikkeller from Copenhagen in Denmark. Let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites and the link to my other reviews that I've done from Mikkeller and my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Baeren Bier. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned to you before. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beers based on the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like in there. If I've viewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese and the Danish playlist because it is dual nationality, and there are playlists there of the beers from all other different countries that I've done so far. So many things to have a look at. But let's go on to my brewery notes then and chat a little bit about these breweries. We'll start with Baeren Bier in this case because they are the home brewery. So, brewery notes. Baeren Bier, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Morioka in Iwate Prefecture in the northern part of Honshu, known as Tohoku, here in Japan, and the company was founded originally back in 2001. But the president of the company is Takeshi Kimura, who originally studied economics at Tohoku University. But he apparently did some home brewing once upon a time, but remained a huge fan of beers and beer culture. And so at one stage he just got the idea that he wanted to start his own brewery, and this stayed with him for quite some time. But he says he was drawn to how varied beer can be. But his brewery came a little bit later than others, and you know, there was a big craft beer boom here in Japan in the early 90s after the economic bubble burst, and they changed the brewing regulations to encourage small businesses to start. But the main reason that these guys were a little bit late to the party, if you like, was because a lot of the breweries that were opening up, the little GB breweries, had parent companies who could finance them, but these guys financed themselves completely independently, from what I understand. But Takeshi, along with his friend Shoichi Yamada, worked with a German brewer by the name of Ivo Odenthal to establish the company. He had previously helped establish the Ginga Kogen brewery and joined Baeren in 2002 and remained with them until 2007. But the brewery thus became known for their German-style brewing, and they actually boast a vast array of vintage German brewing equipment, some of which dates back over 100 years, and this includes a Cool-Ship, which is one of the very few you'll find in Japan. But the brewery would eventually open its doors to the public in 2003, and they can be found in the Kitayama district of the city. But the current brewmaster is Takao Miyake, and he was certified as a brewmaster in Berlin in Germany. But over the last few years, they've continued to develop new recipes and develop the brewery infrastructure. They now have a second brewery in Shizukuishi, which is a more modern operation than the original one. I think they've got, they're using stainless steel and stuff like that, and you'll find that brewery out to the west of Morioka. And they've also got two restaurants now in the centre of Morioka, the Cyan Brew Pub and the beer-based Morioka Ekime, which are both worth checking out from what I understand. And apparently in the Cyan Brew Pub they brew styles that are not exclusively German lagers. But the bear was chosen for the symbol of the brewery because Takeshi felt that it represented the natural riches of Iwate Prefecture and the strength of the original brewing artisans. But the logo that they use, which isn't really on this one, it's on the bottle cap, which I'll show you just now. It basically shows you it shows you the kind of tools that were used by the original Central European brewers, the different, how do you say, the kind of vat stirrers and things like that, the hammers and all of this. But that was actually designed, the brewery symbol for Baeren Bier was designed by Ivo Odenthal. But as of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced about 200 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I said to you earlier, they are mainly different styles of German or Central European lagers. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Baeren Bier for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on to the Danish side of things and the Mikkeller brewery. So Mikkeller, as I've told you before, are the famous Danish gypsy brewery. They were founded back in 2006 by Christian Keller and Mikkel Bjergso, although the company is now exclusively run by Bjergso, who used to be a physics and maths teacher. Christian Keller, from what I understand, went on to work for the Soundhouse magazine. He wanted to have a kind of core range of beers, whereas Mikkel really wanted to be very experimental and just brew whatever he wanted. And so yeah, Mikkel's kind of vision won out, I guess. But again, these guys are very influenced by the American craft beer movement, and they basically started out as the home brewing experimentations of Christian and Mikkel and grew from there. But for a long time they didn't have their own brewery, but rather brewed a variety of host breweries, both in I think it was mainly in Belgium that they brewed, but they brewed in the US, Norway and Scotland, and most of their beer was brewed at the Proef Brewery in Locriste Heefte near Ghent in Belgium. But their home base was the Mikkeller bar on Victoriagade in Copenhagen, but they also have a collaboration bar in the city as well with Toul, whose founders are former students of Mikkel's, and these guys are known as, these bars are known, as Mikkeller and Friends, and they have these in a few different places. But in April of 2016, they took over AleSmith's former brewery in San Diego after they moved on to a larger facility. And then in 2017, they announced that they were going to establish a second brewery at Citi Field, which is home of the New York Mets in New York City. But the New York brewery closed in October of 2020, and it was announced that in August of 2022, that they would cease their brewing operations in San Diego and go back to their kind of gypsy brewing roots. But these days they've got a location in Copenhagen called Warpigs in the Sydbyen meatpacking district, which started as a collaboration with Three Floyds from Munster in Indiana in the US close to Chicago, but it is now independent as of 2021. There is also a Warpigs USA brand, and that one is owned solely by Three Floyds. They also have a location in Copenhagen called Valhalm, out at Restaloon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I always pronounce that wrong, but this is where they experiment with sour beers. They've got 12 oak fodders up there, ranging from 3,000 to 7,000 litres, and about a good number of different barrels that they use, mainly California Chardonnay barrels that they use to age their beers, but the beers are brewed at Warpigs and then transported up to Balhaun to be aged and blended. But they've got a lab up there as well where they can isolate new strains to create house yeasts, and they also have a tap room on site as well which serves the Balhaun beers as well as a few other Mikkeller things as well. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out that place if you get the chance. There's some really interesting things going on up there, and the American guy who does all the brewing and blending and stuff, he's a bit of a head case, and he's just great to talk to. He's very, very passionate about his beer. But over the years, they've built up a whole array of bars and things across the world. So there's bars in Barcelona, Madrid, Berlin, Warsaw, Bucharest, Stockholm, Tórshavn of the Faroe Islands, Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei, Shanghai, as well as various locations in San Diego, Bangkok, and of course their native Copenhagen. But like I said, over the years, Mikkeller have been very, very experimental. They've done a whole host of different beers, probably well over 2,000 beers at this point, maybe even closer to 3,000 when I think about it. But yeah, these guys have been very prolific over the years, and they always tend to be pretty damn solid in my experience. So yeah, if you do get the chance to try some Mikkeller beers, I recommend that you do have a little look at them. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Mikkeller for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, again, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But I do recommend you go and check out Warpigs in Copenhagen, one of my favourite venues in the world, I have to say. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So, as we mentioned earlier, this one comes in at 5% ABV. It is a Vienna lager, and the Vienna lager is a very interesting style. A lot of interpretations I've come across of this beer style from not from Austria have always tended to be quite sweet, but one of my followers was very kind and organised a bunch of Austrian brewed Vienna lagers, and what you'll actually find with this beer style is that it tends to be a little bit more kind of bready and grainy than you might expect. So yeah, I'm curious to see how close this one is to the originals from the Vienna area. But again, very nice artwork as you always get from Mikkeller. Is it John Peter de Villiers who designs these artworks? I forget the guy's name, but yeah, you can see on the bottle cap there is the Baeren Bier symbol with the Iwate bear and the brewer's tools underneath. But yeah, this one is very, very nice, I have to say. It seems that the Mikkeller guys were over here in Japan a wee while ago. They did a collaboration with Mino Beer here in Osaka as well, and that was an imperial coffee stout. So yeah, this should be nice. A 5% Vienna lager from Mikkeller in Copenhagen and Baeren Bier in Morioka in Iwate Prefecture. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Now, if memory serves me correctly, I think I paid about 700 yen for this beer. So that translates to roughly, what's it going to be? Maybe about €5, something like that. So about 50 Swedish kroner, £4.50 sterling, and then maybe, yeah, like $5.50, $6 American, something like that. As I've said to you in many videos before, craft beer in Japan is a little bit more expensive because, you know, all the malt and all the hops and things have to be imported. They don't really grow their own malt or hops here in Japan as of yet. We'll see how things progress as time goes on. But yeah, craft beer is always a little bit more expensive over here. But it is worth it. There are some really good breweries, I have to say. Let's get rid of the brewery notes now and focus on the beer. So, as you can see, this beer is poured kind of something like you would expect from a Vienna lager. So you can see that this beer has about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head. That is going to fade away to be a thinner, more foamy layer as just a thin foamy layer as time goes on. But you can see the bubbles in this one are quite nice. You've got some medium bubbles just next to the liquid there, and a few thinner ones, just a few thinner and more foamy ones as you go further up. But in terms of the colour of this beer, it's kind of what you would expect. This one for me is one of the redder Vienna lagers that I've come across in recent times, and yeah, normally you would expect these beers to potentially be between a little bit red like this and a bit more kind of chestnutty and mahogany like. But yeah, lovely kind of crystal clear colour to this one. One or two bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. But yeah, colour-wise it is very nice. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any adjuncts that you put in or any barrel aging that you do will affect the colour of your beer too, but you don't often have to care about that when it comes to Vienna lagers. So yeah, appearance-wise, it pretty much looks as you would expect. I'm just curious to see how close this one is going to be to the original Viennese ones that I've tried. But yeah, remember, the main definition of a lager beer is that these guys use bottom fermenting yeast, low temperature fermentation, compared to ales which use high temperature fermentation and top fermenting yeasts. You would normally ferment a lager at somewhere between 8 to 12 degrees Celsius, something like that. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see how we get on. I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of this beer. Oh yeah, that is quite nice. Yeah, and I will say this is a style that I know Mikkeller can do pretty well. They've got a beer called the Classic, and that's like a Danish, more kind of malty lager, quite somewhere between a Dunkel, a German Dunkel, and an Austrian Vienna lager. But I can tell you straight away, just from the aroma profile, I think this beer is going to be very true to the original Vienna style. They probably have imported the malts from Austria for this one, just going from the aroma. Yeah, you've got that kind of bready graininess, you've got a wee bit of sweetness in there, you've got a little bit of fruity character, and you've got that smooth, noble hoppy note coming out of this one. Yeah, this smells very, very good. So yeah, from the aroma perspective, it is quite true to the style. Let's just break that down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth though. So for me, aroma-wise, the backbone of this beer, it's like a sort of rye bready bread crust that you can smell in this one. There is a little bit of a kind of woody element to it as well, but yeah, the backbone of the beer for me is definitely like it definitely is more along the lines of a kind of slightly dry rye bread crust. A little touch of woody note in there, like I said, but then above that you can smell a lovely kind of slightly more fluffy wholemeal brown bready character. There is potentially a little bit of a white bready note to this one. But yeah, you can definitely get that little bit of grainy dryness, which for me is the kind of the benchmark, the signature, I guess we could say, of the Viennese brewed Vienna lagers. A lot of the New World ones and foreign interpretations of this beer style make them overly sweet rather than having that little bit of grainy backbone. So yeah, for me, I'm quite excited to try this one, I have to say. But yeah, lovely little bit of smooth kind of wholemeal brown bread coming out of this one. Above that you start to get a little bit of the brown sugar, so you can feel there is a slightly almost leathery dry layer of brown sugar in there, but there's also some toasty elements to that as well, and then you can smell there's a wee bit of a kind of straight up caramel. But I wouldn't say the malty side of this beer is overly sweet. It is a little bit more kind of bready and grainy leaning. There are one or two little nutty elements come out of this beer the more that you smell of it as well, but yeah, a lot of kind of rye bread, wholemeal brown bread, and wee bits of woodiness and nuttiness and things coming out of this one. So yeah, malty side of things, very true to the style so far. Let's have a wee look at the hoppy side of the aroma then. And as I said earlier, again for me, it's typical noble character you're getting out of this one. Austria does of course have its own hop producing region, which if I remember correctly is called the Upper and the Austrian hops are kind of interesting. They're a wee bit more herbal, I think, than the Czech or German ones, but they still have that same noble smoothness to them actually. So for me, the hoppy side of this beer, there's a little bit of earthiness in there, there's a little bit of a kind of herbal type quality to it as well, and yeah, the herbal notes I think come out of this one a wee bit more, the more that you smell of it too. But yeah, definitely a little bit of a kind of brighter floral note out of it. A little bit wetter though, and then you've got some nice grassy elements to the beer too. Quite a wet grassiness and a wee bit of a more oily sort of thing to it as well. But yeah, I would be very curious to know if it is Austrian hops that have been used in this one. Otherwise, my bet would be something along something Slovenian potentially. It doesn't quite have the spiciness of the Czech hops, but it certainly has a little bit of that Slovenian smoothness to it. Maybe like a Styrian Golding or something like that. But yeah, I would not be surprised if it's Austrian hops in this, because they just have a little bit more herbal character to them, but they still have the kind of noble note in there. Yeah, lovely. On the fruity side of things, the beer is kind of as you'd expect. There's a little bit of a kind of oily, peary note to this one, a little bit like dried sultana, something like that, and just a wee tiny hint of a red fruit, like a very slight fig or red currant or something like that. A little bit, maybe a little bit of black currant actually, but the fruity side of the beer isn't too pungent in this one. This beer is more about the kind of rye bready bread crust and the kind of wholemeal brown bread, which is what you would expect of a Vienna lager that's brewed in the Vienna area. Yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck in, but I think we've said everything that we need to about the aroma of this beer. So yeah, this one is the Cool-Ship Vienna lager, 5% ABV from Baeren Bier in Iwate Prefecture here in Japan, in collaboration with Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery originally from Copenhagen. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, kampai. Yeah, that is pretty damn authentic, I have to say. Now, based on the reputation that Baeren Bier have for their lagers, and we will need to try a few more of these going forward now, and based on what I know Mikkeller can do with the more malty styles of lager, I have to say this one, the quality of this beer isn't a surprise to me, but I will say that it is pretty damn authentic. It does come across really nicely from that perspective. So a big thumbs up to both Baeren and Mikkeller for this one. Yeah, lovely stuff. So let's just break this down and describe the aroma for you a wee bit more in depth. So the flavour more in depth, not the aroma. Filming this review a bit too tired, I guess. But yeah, as I say, flavour wise, it gives you everything you would want from the style. So let's just break that down. We'll go to the middle third of your palate with this beer first. So you can feel the backbone of the beer is that lovely, slightly dry, like rye bread type bread crust. And as you go toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a wee bit more woodiness coming out of it. Yeah, you do get a little bit more woodiness coming out of this beer. And one thing I will say about this one though is that when I think of the other Vienna lagers, this beer does have a little bit of sweetness to it. And one thing you will notice in Japan is that if you know the Japanese food and things like that, they do like a little bit of sweetness when it comes to both their food and their alcohol, if you like. So I'm not surprised that this Vienna lager is at the slightly sweeter end of the spectrum. But yeah, it still gives you that signature grainy character that you should expect of a Viennese brewed Vienna lager. So like I say, a little bit of a drier bread crust in the base. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a wee bit of woodiness, but then above that, it does actually feel as if there's like a little bit of rye bready character coming out of this one. This beer, I'm pretty sure, will be all barley malt. I don't think there'll be malted rye in this one, but it does just have a little bit of that kind of rye bready character to it. Above that, you get a more kind of wholemeal, kind of brown bready type character, which feels a little bit more fluffy, but still a little bit dense at the same time. And then above that, you've got a fluffier white bready layer coming out of the beer. So yeah, the I do like how you've got a wee bit of white bread in this one. You can really feel the layers of bread within the middle third of your palate in this beer, and the biggest part of the complexity of the flavour of the beer is in the middle third of your palate with this one, so be aware of that if you try it for yourself. But above the white bready layer, you start to get a little bit of a more kind of leathery, brown sugary character to this one. Usually that's an indicator of a slightly longer wort boil, but I don't think that's going to be the case with this beer. But yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of leathery, brown sugary layer, and then above that you get that nice kind of oily circle where you get the kind of boozy part of the beer, but you can feel the different parts of the brown sugar here. So if you go to the dead centre of the palate, as I say, you've got that little circle there, straight up sweet caramel in the middle, but then as you move out further from that, it gives you a wee bit of a more toasty caramel, and then you can feel the biscuity notes as you move out toward the extremities of that middle third of your palate. But like I say, all of that sits on top of that more leathery, brown sugary layer. One thing you will also get in that middle third of your palate is a wee slight touch of nuttiness, like quite a dry nuttiness the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, I do, as I say, I do like how this beer goes together in that middle third of your palate. It gives you a good level of complexity, which you want from a Vienna lager, and this one, like I say, because it's Japanese, it leans a bit more toward that sweeter side of things. They do like a bit of maltiness in their beers here, I have to say. But I like this one as well. My only complaint about it would be that it's not in a half-litre bottle or can, but I guess that's probably just to do with the scale on which Baeren Bier are brewing, and you know, they do sell their beers in these 330ml bottles actually. And it's a thing in Japan, you know, bottles are viewed as being a more kind of premium product than cans are. It's still that kind of perception is still quite prevalent here in Japan, so a lot of breweries are still bottling rather than canning, which is, yeah, it has its pros and cons, we should say. So yeah, in terms of the back third of your palate, I think we've covered the middle third of your palate. So at the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a kind of brown bready build up in there, a wee bit of rye bread sweetness in there, and I would say the rye bready character of this beer gets sweeter the further into the aftertaste you go, but mix of a kind of rye bread and wholemeal brown bready character in that border region. The layers of flavour on the back third of the palate are quite similar. You can feel the kind of graininess, and you can feel the kind of grainy bread crusty backbone. As I've always said though, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, again, you've got that dry bread crusty note in there, you've got a little bit of an almost crackery note that sits on top of that. You can feel the rye bready layer, which feels a little bit more tall and airy. Above that you've got the wholemeal bready layer, again that feels a little bit more tall and airy than the white bready layer, which is also kind of tall and airy as well. And then above all of that you've got the more kind of yeasty characters coming out of it as well. So yeah, the yeasty character in this beer for me, it's a little bit of a more kind of farmhousey, woody bread, but there's a little bit of kind of honeycomb to it as well actually, which I do quite like. I always get a bit of honeycomb on the back third of the palate with the more kind of yeasty side of things. But it's definitely fair to say that the back third of your palate, the flavour is taller, and then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But I think we've said everything that we need to about the malty and yeasty side of this beer. So let's go on to the hoppy side of things. Back corners of the palate, you get a little bit of that smooth earthiness in there. Then as you move further forward, it's got a wee touch of herbal character, and then as you reach the kind of front corners of your palate, it's got a little bit of a more kind of floral, aromatic sort of note to it. But it's quite a smooth floral aromaticity, this one I have to say. It's not too kind of bright or bitter or anything like that, but as I say, I do quite like how that goes together too. So yeah, around the front curve of the palate, definitely a little bit lighter and grassy, and yeah, for me the floral notes on this one are quite oily, but the grassy side of the beer has a wee touch of zestiness to it, and it just feels a little bit kind of wetter, I would say too. So yeah, the green component for me is quite nice, very smooth but a little bit more oily at the same time. But let's look at the front third of your palate. and just see how things go. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there again, a wee bit of a sweeter kind of brown bready base, and then the backbone of that is a little bit more, you do get a little bit of the kind of dry rye bready bread crust in there, but above it you can also feel a bit of the cracker and a bit of a sweeter wholemeal brown bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, the fruity esters are kind of as we described in the aroma, I would say. So if you go toward the back of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of a kind of sultana type note to it, you know, like dry white green grapes, and as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, it's got a more kind of oily, peary type quality to it, which again I do quite enjoy. Yeah. So yeah, a wee bit of a more oily, peary sort of thing. And then as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, you start to get a little bit of the red fruitiness out of this beer. So there's a wee touch of like fig and black currant for me mainly. And I think it would stick with that. Yeah, the back half is sultanas and pear, and then the front half of the front third of your palate is like a little bit of black currant and a wee bit of a wee bit of black currant and a wee touch of fig. Actually, I think I would stick with that. But yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer, I think, is very nice, and it is true to the Vienna lager style, if you like, the Viennese brewed Vienna lagers. It gives you the graininess that you want, but this one for me, the kind of smooth, sweet, brown, sugary character they get out of this is what makes it a Japanese take on the style. You can see why, if you know Japanese food and Japanese beer, you would see why this beer is exactly as it is. But I think it's really nice. I hope this isn't just a one-off. I hope this is a recipe that Baeren will do again further down the line. I can imagine this would be very nice on tap. But yeah, very good experience, very good first experience with Baeren Bier. We will need to look at reviewing a few more of their things, but not surprised from the Mikkeller perspective, because I've had some really nice malty lagers from them in the past. But let's round off this tasting with just a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, this beer is quite, it's in the light-bodied part of the spectrum, but moving toward the top end of light-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth, the beer has a little bit of oiliness to it, and a wee bit of dryness. But yeah, these are all things that you would expect of the Vienna lager as a style category. In terms of IBUs, I think this is a fairly standard 25-ish, 20-25-ish IBU count, but the dryness of the beer would make you maybe think it's a wee bit more, but the malt, as I said, a bit of dryness, good little bit of smoothness, and a wee bit more of a kind of sweetness to it as well. Then you've got those nice, juicy, fruity characters coming out of the beer too. So yeah, really a nice mix between a more oily, dry fruity character and then the red fruity notes that you expect of the Vienna lager. Just a really nice beer, this one, true to the style, and I think it's really nicely done. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about this one. This was the Cool-Ship Viennal Lager, 5% ABV from Baeren Bier in Morioka in Iwate Prefecture in Tohoku, the northern part of Honshu here in Japan, in collaboration with Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery, originally from Copenhagen. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mikkeller as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the near future, and I'm hoping we can get a hold of some more beers from Baeren Bier as well. But until then, Slange, Skål, cheers, thank you for watching, and Kampai.